across Northern Lincolnshire and East Yorkshire.
This is BBC Radio Humberside.
Have an update of the sports news in under 10 minutes' time. Now, the relaunch of Top Gear on BBC Two last night was watched by more than 4 million people, according to overnight viewing figures. The new host of the show, of course, is Chris Evans. He said earlier in the week that he would be disappointed with anything fewer than 5 million viewers for the first episode. The relaunch was still, though, the most watched programme of the night in the 8 o'clock slot, with a share of almost 23% of the audience. Well, Paul Woodford is from Hull. He presents several car shows on the telly and online, and in fact auditioned for a role on the new look Top Gear. Joins me live on the programme this afternoon. Paul, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, James. Good to have you on. Thank
you very much for joining me. Now, we're looking for song suggestions for the relaunch of Top Gear. I probably wished I hadn't done that now, because the song suggestions haven't been positive.
No, I don't think Chris would have liked any of those songs driving home from the studio when he filmed Top Gear, would he?
Now, you watch the programme, and to say the least, you are an enthusiast about cars, and you do present a lot of programmes on the telly, so you have a better understanding and view of these things. What did you make of the programme last night?
I actually tweeted straight after to say, look, I would watch Top Gear even if it was rubbish, but it was far from rubbish last night. But that said, I think it could have been a bit more about cars. That's how I feel. I think it was a bit too much Matt LeBlanc and Chris Evans, and perhaps they had to establish that, but they kind of started it business as usual. There was no sort of build-in, no epic film to introduce where they got to. Just sort of went straight in as if it was business as usual. And I suppose, format-wise, it was. And that might be their mistake. That's not a judgment on my part, but that might be, if anything, their mistake. And that's certainly what the noise is saying online. The format was the thing that needed to change before, and they haven't changed it for the new Top Gear.
That's interesting you say that, because it wasn't that long ago that, I think it was in the Radio Times, that the producer, or the then producer of Top Gear, even said that the programme probably had a shelf life, was maybe at some point likely to be put to pasture. Now the presenters and he is gone, but the format's continued. In a sense, would now have been the right time to have drawn a line and actually done something different?
No, I was half expecting what would have been brilliant. I was really disappointed it didn't happen. Was, as I say, an epic intro film. It kind of touched on what happened before, acknowledged the fact that this wasn't perhaps everyone's ideal scenario for Top Gear, but then went into what happened and changed the format completely. It had something new and exciting. And I fail to believe that there are people in that team that don't have the creativity to come up with those new ideas. Certainly, Clarkson and co came up with what happened before, and Andy Wilman, the producer. So there was no need for Chris and co to continue that, I don't think. But it was still entertaining. I still enjoyed watching it last night. That's important.
See, when it started, I've got to admit that I'm not a car fan. I can't drive, and I've never really been a car fan particularly, and certainly not a petrol head. But I did watch it last night, and I've seen bits of the original Top Gear. The one thing I thought was a slight shame was a lot of the Clarkson-esque things that used to happen, like the reference to On That Bombshell and the things to do with Tonight. Maybe did they try too hard to perhaps replicate some of that when they didn't need to?
Yes, they did, and there was also quite a few overt jokes to the elephant in the room, to take one of Clarkson's favourite expressions from the end of Top Gear last time, because they kept referring to the whole Clarkson thing instead of being sort of open about it being a new era. But if you notice the beginning part, there were a lot of guys sat on a Vectra. Now, of course, a Vectra was Jeremy Clarkson's least favourite car in the world, quite outspokenly. So that was another dig. But I don't know, perhaps that was entertainment value. Perhaps we need to look past that and think, well, okay, they were acknowledging Clarkson. And Evans is meant to be friends with Clarkson and friends, isn't he?
What about the long-term future of this programme? Because making no secrets about it, the BBC needs this to work because it's a big money spinner for the corporation. The sort of commercial arm of the BBC makes a lot of money from Top Gear, Paul, and I think it's something in the region of 50 million pounds it makes, 50 to 100. So the BBC needs this to work. Do you think long-term it has the staying power to work?
The BBC needs it to work. We, as petrol heads, need it to work. And for me personally, I need it to work because I still want to dream that I can be on Top Gear one day. If it dies, I can't. So I want it to work. Let's face it, nearly 4.5 million viewers on the first show last night. Perhaps some of the hype had a bit to do with that, but I've got a feeling that the hype that will be on between last night's show and next week's show, I think, will probably have a similar viewing audience, because everyone wants to see what they come back with, how they respond to it, and they're going to have to respond. They have to respond in some way, because there was a lot of negative noise, and not just from the naysayers. I noticed quite well-known people on Twitter who were quite in support of Chris Evans in the build-up to New Top Gear, who were quite outspoken about the negative aspects of last night's show. I think it's they've got a hard job, haven't they? It's a poison chalice for Chris Evans. He has to make it work for his career. Everyone else that's on there, from Chris Harris through to Sabine Schmidt and Matt LeBlanc, they're playing at it. They can have some fun, and they've got some credibility in their own little world. This needs to work for Chris Evans and for the BBC. And I can't see it failing, regardless of what people say about last night's show. I just can't.
What about you then? You were one of the people that put an application in or sent an audition tape for Top Gear. Did you hear back? Did you get some advice from that application process?
I didn't, but a few of my friends have said, that's a bit unfair. They should have got back to you. What? Along with the other 15 million people who probably sent audition tapes in. Look, they made it very clear that they were just putting the feelers out, see who was out there, and see who suited their new style of show. And I've actually spoken to Chris Harris. I know Chris Harris, and I've spoken to him since. He's one of the guys that got one of the new positions. And from his point of view, all the negative stuff in the build-up was quite funny, because he knew that what they were working on was quite special. So I don't think we've seen what New Top Gear has to offer yet, but certainly from my point of view, having auditioned for it, would I still want to be a part of that? Do I still wish that I'd got the job? Yes, I do. Yeah, I do.
And what about you then, Paul? You do present yourself. You present one or two motoring shows, which is great, because you're a local guy. You're based here in the area, from Hull, and you do that. Where can people watch stuff with Paul Woodford on and see perhaps the making of the next Top Gear presenter?
There's a range of places, actually. If you go to carfilms.co.uk, nice and simple, that's where I put all my own car films that basically have no sort of interjections from anyone else. That's how I want to do car films, and they're all on there, from classic cars to racing cars and rally cars. But then there's a new show coming out on Channel 5. Can I mention Channel 5?
Of course you can.
In the summer, called The Cars That Made Britain, and that features people like Jodie Kidd, Jules Holland, and Steve Coogan, Alan Partridge, and me. I'm on that show. So I'm doing some bits and pieces there, which was funny, because I went to a studio in London and spent a day filming about cars and didn't see one car, which is a different way of doing a car show for me. But there's a few other things in the making as well. I'm working with a production company called Special Stage for a rally TV show, which I've done for many years. But we've branched out into racing. We're doing historic racing now, which is Ford GT40s and Le Mans cars, priceless cars that go door to door and mirror to mirror on UK racetracks, and that's very exciting. So a whole range of things happening in the Paul Woodford world, but I'm not ever ruling out Top Gear, despite not having heard from them, and I'd still like to be a part of that show one day, and I really, really do hope that they can make it work, they can answer the critics from last night's show and pull it around, because last night's was always going to be a strange one, because they had to launch it, establish a few things, and let's face it, there are some people who don't know who Matt LeBlanc is, as crazy as that sounds to people of your and my age, James.
Paul, good to speak to you. Thank you very much for joining us on the programme. I wish you well. We'll speak, no doubt, when that Channel 5 programme is launched.
Speak to you soon.
Paul Woodford, local motoring journalist and local motoring presenter. You can see, as Paul was saying, on the television very soon, joining me on the programme this afternoon. The BBC's Joshua Cook's here with the sports news. Josh, like Paul, you're a big fan of Top Gear yourself, aren't you?